Hey everyone, Scott and Phil from Wealth Lab Podcast. And today we're diving into a topic that no one loves, but everyone needs: super versus inheritance, how death and gifting impact your pension. It sounds heavy, right? But stick with us. We'll make it straightforward and even a little bit of fun.
Yeah, look, I mean, we've touched on this topic through a number of our podcasts over the last little while. Most of us blokes are going to die before our wives. But, even setting that aside, it's likely that, you're not both going to make it to the finish line at the same time. So today it's probably worthwhile. Let's touch off on some of the tips and traps and decisions and things you need to think about and plan for. Not that you want to think about these things, but better to have planned for it now than find out when it's too late.
So if we were to sort of start at the smaller bit and build it up, what are the smaller things that people should be thinking about when they come into retirement? What are the first? We'll end on the sort of the big ones. What are those little ones that maybe we're not thinking that much about?
Maybe we'll start a little bit lighter and maybe not so much the technical stuff, but just things that I think are really important that often when I speak to couples I haven't spoken about is actually just kind of if there's any estate planning goals, like what's important to you that happens with your assets when you're no longer here. Some people say to me, well, nothing, Phil, hopefully I've spent a lot, and well, good on you. That's great. That would be an ideal outcome. But if that doesn't happen, what's next? The standard ones are obviously the kids and that sort of thing, but I've got some clients that have some specific charities they want money to go to. They don't have kids, particular animals and stuff they want to take care of. So that's an important thing. There's a number of stuff. So you really want to, as a partnership, if you are a couple, you need to be sitting down and having that conversation and making sure you're aligned. And if you're single, then maybe thinking about, where you want things to go and what you want to happen, and make sure that your executives are sort of clear around some of that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, look, I've actually picked up a client over maybe a couple, but there's one that comes to mind specifically who picked up and which she had assets that she specifically didn't want to pass over to one side of the family. So also of not just sort of the 50% to the kids. It's like, okay, well, you know what, this family, these members, I really don't want them to get my assets, and I want to work really hard. I want to build my wealth as possible, but I don't want them to get anything from me. So she actually was concerned because she came to me and she was like, Scott, if we make money here, I don't want them to get this money. If we just leave it where it says it's not really growing that much, there's a smaller pool for them to come after. So that was an interesting planning conversation to have, which was, are you sure that you don't want much money? Worst case scenario, you lose half of it, but like half of a bigger pool is still half of a bigger pool. So I had to get around that one.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? But look, there's no right or wrong with estate planning either. Like, this is your money. It's up to you what's the right thing for it. But, you do need to plan stuff out. And estate planning can be tricky because, much like financial planners, not all estate planners are equal. You'll get some really, really good ones, and you'll get some that'll just slap a boilerplate thing together and get you to sign it. But it is a bit of an exercise in trying to predict the future because we don't know what's going to happen. We don't know who's going to be the first to go, who's going to be around afterwards, and all those sort of things. So it needs to be a little bit more thought out than just, if I die, my wife gets my super, or my husband gets my super, and if we both die, it goes to the kids. Well, what happens if something happens to the kids first? Or are you worried that maybe one of your kids is really bad with money and they're going to burn a lot? Do you need to protect that? Or are they in a business that's a bit risky and it might go bankrupt and you need to protect from that? Or do you hate the daughter-in-law and you're worried she's going to try and, leave the son and bugger off with the money, or vice versa? And we need to protect against. So, if this happens, then this happens, these kind of thoughts, you need to think a few steps ahead with it.
So what you need to do is you actually write it down in your mind and then come to us as a planner, and then also speak to your lawyer around. So we can help with the strategy. The lawyers will do the physical documentation. And that's the process on what it looks like. Us or any other advisor that you choose to work with.
Yeah. Mind mapping can be a really great exercise for that. Actually, just planning out, if this happens, when's that? Branch it out, think it through. It's
envelope,
important.
envelope, piece of paper. That's like, you don't need to get complex. So, pause this, do that, and then come back to us.
Some of the more basic stuff, and probably where it gets a little more complex and requires a lot more thinking too, is blended families. Maybe you've come into a relationship with different asset pools. One's got kids, one doesn't, or whatever. These situations get pretty complex. So you really want to be having a good chat in those scenarios. Something else to think about.
So Phil, talk to me about spouse versus adult children. There's very different tax results on inheritances. So let's say, you're a switched on person, you're watching this video, the bucket has been kicked and you're out. What happens now with the assets if they go to your spouse versus adult children?
Yeah, good question. Look, there's no sort of estate tax as such, aside from maybe capital gains tax. So if you inherit assets that have grown and have some capital gains tax implications or something along those lines. Well, we sit here and we say there's no real estate tax in Australia, but as you know, if you've watched a few of our episodes, you'll have seen us talk about this before. Depending on who your superannuation goes to, part of that benefit, death benefit, may be taxable. Where Scott's talking about the difference between going to a spouse versus adult kids. And then this is another one that's true. We've talked a lot about couples, but if you're a single person, maybe you've got no kids, and quite commonly, when I speak to people in that scenario, maybe they're leaving their superannuation to nieces and nephews or something like that. This is something that would impact that scenario too. So, if I pass away, my super goes to my spouse, it's going to go tax-free. That's fine. There's no particular issues to worry about there. Well, that's a lie. There are issues, but not tax issues. If it goes to my adult children, or, if I'm single and I've got no kids and I've sent it to my niece and nephews or whatever, they are going to pay tax on it. So, it's 15% tax rate on the taxable component. So, not to get too complex there, but in your super, you'll have a taxable and a tax-free component. Most of that's going to be taxable.
Jump in. So we're checking your super statement to see what that looks like. It's different funds show it in different ways, but they do have to show it to you. And it'll be a mix. You'll at least have, if you've been working more than 15 years, you'll at least have some of it will be tax-free, some of it will be taxable.
But, for most people we speak to, the majority of your super benefit's going to be taxable if it's inherited by adult children, non-dependents, nieces, nephews, a charity, whatever else. So, go back and watch the previous videos if you want to see some strategies around managing some of that. I won't hit all that again today because we'll be here all day. But there is stuff that can be done about that. So have a chat to someone, us, for example, if that's something that's important to you. So there are some implications to think about, though, for your spouse. So, we've spoken about maybe, it's not going to be taxable when it passes to them, but we still need to think about some other sort of more strategic things or potentially unintended impacts that are going to happen there. So one thing to be aware of, and if you haven't done this is your homework after watching this podcast. You need to make sure that you've got your nominations for who your super is going to pass to sorted out on your fund. What I mean by that is some of you will be familiar with the term binding nomination. Your fund will offer you the ability to lodge a binding nomination, which tells them who you would like your super to go to. There are different ways you can do nominations. There's a binding and there's non-binding. And the reason you want to probably look at a binding is because if you've got no nomination whatsoever, the trustee of your super fund needs to determine who the appropriate person to pay your superannuation to is.
If you've got a spouse and a few adult kids and maybe some grandkids, it's messy and they don't care about you, and there'll be documents that they follow, but it might actually not be your wishes. And just to clarify, your superannuation assets are not like a house or a bank account. It doesn't automatically flow what the will says. It doesn't actually follow it. So when you pass your super to your dependents, your spouse or kids under 25, or anyone who's financially dependent on you, without the direction, the fund trustee decides. So it could be 25%, 25%, 50%. It could be 30%, 30%, 30%. Or it could be a mess, and there could be assets you want to specifically give to this person versus that.
So it can get messy. And the other thing is, even if it doesn't get messy, even if it seems obvious and it is going to go to your spouse or whatever, they've still got to advertise, they've still got to allow potential claims to come forward, all that sort of stuff. You've only got to read a newspaper to see how long some of these funds that I may have already mentioned have dragged out death claims. They have, there's cases where they've taken over a year. It's insane, which shouldn't happen. So make sure you have not.
Or was it a super that just got sued for being so bad at taking, they were so slow at paying life insurance? I think it was CBUS, wasn't it?
So,
I think it was with most of them.
Yeah.
Underinvestment in customer service. Who would have thought?
Yeah. That and TBD benefits as well.
Hey guys, Jordan here. Just wanted to jump in and interrupt the boys. This is Scott's dog, Isla. We're hanging out, having a good time. Anyway, if there are any questions that you guys have that are still unanswered, anything at all, you want to get some clarity, some peace of mind, there's a link in the description. Book in, take 15 minutes. We'll just have a quick chat, figure out whether or not we can help. Click the link, book in. I'll talk to you guys soon.
So make sure your binding nomination is done. It's really important. It'll help speed things along, gives you certainty, makes things smoother. Don't think it's going to go in accordance with your will. Not going to happen. You get another option when you're in pension phase. A lot of funds will then offer you a further option, which is called a reversionary beneficiary. So instead of just having the binding nomination that says give it to my wife, give it to my husband, whatever, you've got what's called a reversionary beneficiary. And the difference is, if I pass away and I've got a binding nomination, that death benefit becomes payable as a lump sum to my wife. Some funds may allow you to flip it to pension, but whatever. If it's in a pension now and I'm getting my income in retirement, that pension's getting closed, we've got a lump sum we've got to deal with. It might get paid out of your super. You might be able to do a pension. You might not. It's going to depend on fund rules. A reversionary beneficiary very simply says, if I've got myself and my wife and we're both getting a pension and that's what we're living off. When I'm talking about pension here, not age pension, I'm talking about drawing a pension from your super, drawing an income from your super. And I pass away and I've got a reversionary beneficiary in place. All that happens there is very simply my name gets taken off it, my wife's name gets put on it, and it continues to pay. No break in income. Away we go. Nice and simple. But it still comes with some concerns and some things you got to plan for. So one of those is going to be a thing called the pension transfer balance cap. Today, the pension transfer balance cap's at $2 million. And that is the maximum amount of money that a person is allowed to hold in pension phase. We've spoken about before, you kind of want to hold as much as you can in pension phase. Your earnings are tax-free, great place to have money. If you've got a couple, one of them passes away, that money transfers to the surviving spouse as a reversionary beneficiary. And we've now got more than $2 million in that person's account. They're going to breach the pension transfer balance cap. So they're going to have to take some money out. So you're going to have 12 months to figure out what you want to do there. I won't get into the complexities of it. The ATO kind of runs a debit and credit system and how they manage what money is in your pension and up to that and how they measure that pension transfer balance cap. They'll give you 12 months before they count that as a credit. So you've got some time to figure it out, but it's still a thing you've got to plan for. And so maybe some of that planning should start earlier while you're both alive and you're managing maybe proportions you're drawing from each other's super. If you expect one spouse to go earlier than other, maybe there's some medical expenses or whatever. If you need lump sums, maybe you're targeting one over the other that's going to go earlier or whatever. There's stuff you might do there. So that's one thing to be aware of. But the other problem, potentially a much bigger problem, because, face it, there's not that many people that are one spouse is going to pass away and it's going to trigger a pension transfer balance cap breach for the surviving spouse. But what will happen in a lot of other cases is that now we've gone from being two people assessed as a couple for the age pension, and now I'm only one person, but I've got the same amount of assets. So they can just about overnight wipe out your pension eligibility or significantly decrease it. Look, in that scenario, there's really not going to be too much you're going to be able to do with it, short of, maybe looking at some lifetime pension products, annuities, all sorts of complex stuff. Talk to a planner. There will be some steps, but maybe you've got a problem, maybe you don't.
Right. Okay. So tell me, Phil, what happens why don't I just give the funds to kids right now? Like, what happens if I help out the kids with a house deposit or a wedding or whatever it is, pay towards their kids' schooling? What do you reckon?
Sounds great. Yeah. I mean, if you're looking for a recipient, more than willing to pay, I'm more than happy to pay my kids' school fees, whatever. Look, seems like a good idea. But if I'm on the age pension and that happens, now I've got this big chunk of money and just I've given it to my kids to pay, pay their mortgage off, give them 200 grand. Great. My kids are happy, but it's actually not going to help me with the age pension because Centrelink are going to look at it and go, well, actually you've given some money away. That's what we call a deprived asset. And we're still going to assess you as though you've got that money. So now you've lost the benefit of the money. You're not earning interest on it, but you're still being assessed as though you have it for the age pension. They'll continue to assess you having that money for 5 years.
Phil, let's say, for example, you've given some kids the assets. Do you have to notify, like we've given money away to the kids, do I have to notify Centrelink? Or do they just see my bank account or do I do it at the end of the tax year? What do I do there?
Well, yes to both those questions. Yes, you do need to notify them. You've got 14 days to notify Centrelink of any significant change. So that actually goes for just the spouse passing away in the first place. You inheriting that money, you've got 14 days to tell them. If you gift that money, you've got 14 days to tell them. If you do not, yes, they will know what's in your bank account and what's gone out. They're very, very good at that. It's always gives me the shits when you're going through a pension application because they're so complex and they ask for so much information. And at the end of the year, they tell you everything you have anyways.
So basically, the impact is excess gifts could slash your age pension by $3 per $1,000 in assets. There is upper threshold limit supply. You might just want to check that one as well.
No, so that harks back to what I was talking about at the start of the podcast. So like be really clear with, your significant other, or if you're single, your executor or whatever, what you want to happen with this money. And if your intention at some point is to give the kids a chunk of money, well, don't wait till you've passed away and then pass it to the spouse and make the spouse do it and get smashed on the age pension. Give it to them in the will. It's not a gift. They've inherited it.
If you're a client of mine, I like to talk about the book that's called Die with Zero by Bill Perkins. Bill Perkins was a guy that made his millions as a hedge fund trader. He made a fortune in energy markets. And then after some time staring at his navel, decided to write a book. And that's nice for those, hedge fund millionaires to then go write a book, bless them. But his idea was really sound, which was instead of just like burning your assets, create basically buckets for the kids and the spouse. and give that money to them well and truly before you pass away. He argues in the book, which I believe is correct, that you get a lot more pleasure from seeing your kids use your money if you're in your 60s and 70s than you would in your 80s or 90s, because that money when they're younger makes a bigger difference. They can get on the housing ladder, they can afford the private school they want, they can get the safer car, whatever, it doesn't matter. But you actually will feel really good about that money because you see the benefit that it gets, and it gives them that compounding wealth growth as well if you are giving it to them before you start drawing on the age pension if you're eligible.
Yeah. Okay, look, that does make sense. I would put a massive caveat on that, though, that don't do that if you can't afford to. Make sure that you are very clear that you have enough money to live. We're probably talking about a fairly small subsect of people here, but hedge fund traders go nuts, give away whatever the hell you want.
Yes. If you are struggling and there is the asset pool genuinely isn't there, if you've done a ChatGPT plan or something like that and it shows you that you're going to run out of completely all of your assets at age 63, okay, that's when we need to worry about other things there. So that's for sure. But you know what? If you're listening to this podcast and you're 20 minutes in, I would hazard that you've got more money than the average Australian. So that's my hot take. I don't know what you think, Phil. I think
my standard answer for everything, mate, horses for courses.
Moving on, where this all falls apart, and this is probably moving on to the average age. The average life expectancy is getting older, and if you're a couple of financial planning nerds, you'll look at the actuary tables that are published each year on the expected life, the average Australian's life expectancy. It's a little bit frustrating that they don't give you more information, because what they do is they basically just give you a national average. But for example, if you're someone who has a BMI below, say, 37 and you live in a national city or something like that, then your life expectancy is going to be different. And that would be helpful because we can then at a national level figure it out. What we do here when our modeling is have a conversation with you saying, well, we need to pick a number. What age do you want this modeling to either run out at or maybe just stop? And let's say, for example, people say, well, my nana she was 95, but I'm a bloke and maybe I'm 88, 89, something like that. It's really important to consider that next 20 years, we're going to see some amazing medical breakthroughs, especially around life extension. I know that's a big thing at the moment. So I think it's having enough assets to support you to have a great quality of life in your 80s and not just be sort of bedridden. And I think we will find in moving into the 2030s, 2040s, our clients will be living a higher quality of life because there'll be a higher quality of aged care, and planning for that is a key thing. And that's where certainly giving money away is an issue, but also making sure that the building blocks are there, that you're comfortable about maybe second families in your later in life, which is always an interesting one.
All right, beautiful. So, look, I think there's a bit to consider, I suppose. It's not as simple as I drop off the perch, spouse gets money, kids get money if both drop off the perch. So I think that's the point of this podcast. And there are some nuances that are not going to impact everyone, but will certainly impact some people, and different nuances will impact different people. You know, if you're worried about the pension transfer balance cap at $2 million, you're probably not worried about the age pension and vice versa. So, there's going to be individual concerns that we've got to worry about. But the last thing you want is to have one of these impacts slap you in the face and not be prepared for it. You know, all of a sudden have your age pension cut off or completely or very significantly reduced and not be prepared and not planned for it. And making sure your assets are there that are going to support you on your own and what your lifestyle is going to look like. So I suppose, we're all going to die. Nothing any of us can do about that. But what we can do is make sure that we plan for the outcomes that we want once we're gone. Good preparation early is going to avoid these things. It's going to make sure you're ready for whatever happens.
The common mistakes we see: non-binding nomination, binding nomination forms not correctly filled in, out-of-date documents that at a random super fund that you filled in this one time, you did it correctly, but now you've actually moved super funds, so it's actually out of date.
Actually, super key point to your minds would be blown if you knew how many times I've seen somebody with their ex-partner still listed as the binding nomination and they're remarried. Don't do that. That is a problem.
No coordination between the will and the super. So, for example, some people are going, yeah, we've got a will, that's great, but you've got the super binding nomination. They need to be formed together. They need to be ideally in the same location, in a file on your folder, on your phone, physical, doesn't matter, same location, so that everyone can find it. Not having good family conversations. So talk to your spouse, talk to your kids, talk to your parents, go up, down, sideways, have this conversation now, and you're going to avoid those pitfalls.
Yeah, 100%. And not just about money too. Don't forget your organ donation preferences too, just for a bit of a random one to wrap up on.
Great. All right, guys. Thanks so much. We will see you next week.